2023 is finally here. Let me just go on record right now by saying that this will be a banner year. Great things are going to happen for you. Great things are going to happen for me. In 10 or 15 years, we're going to look back on 2023 and say, hey, wasn't that a great year? I have no reason for saying that other than just blind optimism. So for the love of God, I hope that statement does not age poorly. But before we get to the business of 2023, I do have some 2022 housekeeping to do. Specifically, I need to list off the rest of the games that I beat last year. Now, once again, I should clarify that these are the games that I beat for the very first time last year. I do replay games constantly throughout the year. We're not counting any of those. Only the games that I beat for the first time are included. Now, I did put out a video about 6 months back where I talked about the games that I beat in the first half of last year, which if you haven't seen, I invite you to go check out because I had a lot of fun making it. But in either case, I'm still going to roll a quick recap montage of all the games that I beat between January and June of 2022. Now, one of the games I closed out the first half of 2022 with was Adventure Island. This wasn't a game that I really wanted to play per se, but it was a game that I felt was a necessary one to play before I got to the Adventure Island games that I was actually interested in. The first of these was Super Adventure Island, which I managed to squeak in at the very end of June, and the second of these was Adventure Island 3. Now, I thought this was a significant improvement over Adventure Island 1. The graphics are much better, and most importantly, the control is much better. Master Higgins, or whatever his name is, he moves a bit more like Mario in this game, so it no longer has the slippery, almost endless runner controls of the first game. It also gives you a lot more Mario-like concessions. You can kind of stockpile your extra items like your weapons and your dinosaurs, much like Mario did in Mario 3. I will say that the last world or island in Adventure Island 3 was probably every bit as difficult as the last one from Adventure Island 1. However, because of the improved controls and the ability to stockpile your items, it was much less frustrating to get through. My only real complaint about Adventure Island 3 was that its soundtrack was not nearly as catchy or infectious as the music from Adventure Island 1. But other than that, I thought it was a much more enjoyable game. Now, one event that made kind of a big stir last year was the closing down of the Wii U digital store. I didn't want to miss out on anything, so I took the opportunity to download a couple of the digital titles that I'd been kind of on the fence about. One of these was the first Fire Emblem game for the Game Boy Advance, which I think was called just Fire Emblem. Now, I love the Fire Emblem series, and this game was no different. Honestly, if you played any of the other Fire Emblem games, you know pretty much what to expect from the rest of the series. And I like this one quite a bit. I mean, I like the characters, the story was good, I love the gameplay, of course. Other than that, it was a Fire Emblem game, so that's kind of all I gotta say. Another series I played through last year was the Joe and Mac Caveman Ninja series. Now, I've always loved these games for some reason, even though up until last year I'd never actually finished any of them. Many years ago I spent a lot of time with the Sega Genesis version and the Super Nintendo version, but unfortunately at the time I was not able to beat either one of them. So last year I decided it was finally time to rectify that, so I played through all 4 of the Joe and Mac games that I have: the Super Nintendo, Genesis, and also the NES and Game Boy versions. The funny thing is that the 4 of them were all just slightly different. I think they might have used a different developer for each of the games, I'm not really sure. I can say for certain that the NES version was by far the worst of the 4 of them, and I would honestly say is actually the worst game that I played last year. Just a quick, dry little observation. If there's a game that comes out on multiple platforms and the Game Boy version is this much better than the NES version, then you as the NES developer have done something wrong. Now, another game I played last year was Gimmick, which of course is the Famicom version of Mr. Gimmick. I borrowed this from another member of the community and I've since returned it, otherwise I'd be holding it up for the camera right now. And I liked it. It had great graphics, and of course it's a Sunsoft game, so it naturally has a fantastic soundtrack. Challenge was pretty high. Now this was just a quick and dirty playthrough of the game. I didn't do the extra work to get the real ending. I just played through it, returned it to its rightful owner, and they moved on to Wampum. Now this is another game that I've had for a long time. Just like Gremlins 2, I bought this in the early days before there was a collection, when I was basically just buying all the games that I remembered from my childhood really cheaply off of eBay. That was probably about 15 years ago, so 2022 was the year I finally dusted it off and beat the game. Now Wampum plays like basically, I don't know, Mega Man Light. You can play the first 6 stages in any order you want. You get elemental themed abilities from the bosses you defeat. Relatively easy until you get to the final stage, which did honestly give me a bit of trouble. But with some perseverance I saw it through and I liked it. It was a good game. Another game I played through was Kabuki Quantum Fighter, which I've also heard called Quantum Fighter Kabuki. Now this is a game published by HAL, but I believe the developer is actually the same one that developed Monster Party. The easiest comparison to make would be to say it's like the NES version of Batman or Ninja Gaiden or Shadow of the Ninja or Vice Project Doom. It's basically like all of those games. And it's not really as good as any of those games, but I'd still probably give it a 7 out of 10, which I think is a respectable score. So it's one I can easily recommend if you like any of the other games that I just compared it to. And I also played through Mighty Final Fight and Bucky O'Hare. Now, I don't have much to say about either one of these games since I've already talked at length about both of them in another video. As it happens, I hadn't beaten either one of these games before, so while I was capturing footage for that video, I decided to knock both of them off the list. Now, one thing I look forward to every year as Halloween starts to loom in the horizon is playing through what I think of as Halloween games. And in 2022, I kicked off the Halloween season with Catherine, only because I didn't really know anything about the game. I remember when this game came out, it was notorious for its very suggestive art style and character design, but I remember that no one really knew what the game was.
This month, I'm running really late.
Huh?
I think I'm pregnant.
It looked like it might be vaguely spooky to me. That's why I tried to make it a Halloween game. It's not. It's not a Halloween game at all. Honestly, the game is more like, hey, do you remember Pushmo? You know, that game where you gotta push the blocks in and out of the screen and get to the top of the stack? Yeah, that's what this game is. So it's basically an action puzzle game with a really elaborate coat of paint over it. Outside of the puzzle mode, the game is essentially an interactive cutscene where you're basically just pressing the buttons to make the story happen. It's a game I didn't really think a whole lot of as I was playing it, other than just kind of passively enjoying it. But as time has passed, it's continued to kind of creep into my mind, and I'm definitely going to go back and play it again in the future. And a side note, as I was playing this game, my wife was in the other room playing Persona 5, and a few times she actually came into the room and kind of watched me play for a little bit. And several times she made the observation that whoever developed Persona 5 should sue the developers of Catherine because of how similar they were. And I was just like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I never played Persona 5, but I did look up the developers later on. Same developer, same team as far as I know as the Persona series. I guess this game might work well enough as like a side story within the Persona universe, but as near as I could tell, other than the art style and the energy, the games aren't anything alike.
Go ahead, answer it.
Okay. Hello?
Oh, hello. It's me.
Hello. Thank you for calling.
What are you doing?
So with Catherine out of the way, I got into the proper Halloween games, starting with a community favorite, Monster Party. I love this stupid game. It is so weird and bizarre and outright disturbing in some parts. I've made several attempts in the past years to beat it, but I always get stuck at the stupid, obnoxious door maze level. I think that's where everyone gets hung up. But in 2022, I vowed to finish this game one way or another, even if I had to play that maze level all night long.
Back in the day gamer does not look up how to beat anything. I don't watch a video on it. I don't look it up anywhere. Nowhere.
Yeah, well, Mr. Matthews does. After pulling my hair out for longer than I care to admit, I finally broke down and looked up a map. After that, I was able to finish the game under my own power, and I still love this game in spite of the door maze level, and I'll continue to play this every year. And yes, I'll probably look up a map every year too. I played a number of games for the Halloween video I did last year, but I only completed one of them, which was Wendy Every Which Way. Now this is a very cute, silly little game from WayForward, and it has become somewhat collectible lately, probably because it was developed by WayForward, so it has that Shantae momentum behind it. It's a pretty easy game. It's obviously aimed at a younger demographic. Now I'm not sure how much this game goes for now, other than being more than I paid for it, but it's not a great game at all. It's certainly not worth whatever they're charging for it on eBay. Then I played through, well, not Shovel Knight, but the Spectre of Torment story campaign. Now, I've loved these extra campaigns that came with Shovel Knight. Plague of Shadows so far was my favorite, but I like the Spectre Knight one quite a bit as well. It wasn't as good as the original Shovel Knight or Plague of Shadows, but it was still pretty good and had the added bonus of being a Halloween game. Now, it goes without saying that the Castlevania series is a great one to visit around Halloween, and last year I focused on Dracula X. Now, it may be blasphemy to some, but I actually prefer Dracula X to Super Castlevania. Super Castlevania is a good game, I do like it, but I think that Dracula X looks and plays and definitely sounds more like a traditional Castlevania game. Now this game is pretty tough and it does have multiple endings, so I had to practice it for a week or two before I saw them all. However, because of the amount of time that I spent practicing it, I did end up no death running it a couple times while I was going after all the endings, but only on the bad ending. When you qualify for the good ending by rescuing Maria and Annette, the death battle changes, and it gets a lot harder. I tried for a while to get the no death run on the good ending, but the only time that I got through the death battle unscathed, I died on Dracula, like an idiot. So that effectively killed my drive to go for anything better than a one death run. Maybe next year, who knows? And then my proudest moment of Halloween was finally beating Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Now I did do this one legit. I spent a week or two practicing the game, getting a little further in the game every night until I was finally able, relatively smoothly, to get through both loops of the game and finally beat the last boss. One thing Super Ghouls and Ghosts does that's different from Ghosts and Goblins is that you don't have unlimited continues. You're basically buying continues as you go by collecting these money bags throughout the levels. And as long as you're actually playing the game well, you're always going to be earning enough money bags to keep buying continues. So for most of the game, you essentially do have what amounts to unlimited continues, until you get to the last stage on the second loop. Because in that stage, there aren't enough money bags for you to collect to earn any more continues. So basically, whatever continues you have, I think it maxes out at 9, going into that stage, that's how many you now have to finish the game. So the clock is basically ticking, and that last boss is pretty challenging, so it did take me a few times. And when I say the last boss, I don't mean the last boss, he's pretty easy. I mean the second to last boss, the green guy. He's pretty tough. But because I am stubborn and I persevered, I beat that last stage, I beat that second to last boss, and I beat the game. And that is how I closed out Halloween of 22. Now, I found myself on a shooter or a shmup kick last year. I started out the year beating Gradius and Abadox, and I continued that trend into the second part of the year, starting with Image Fight. This is a vertical shooter from IREM, and it does have a passing resemblance to the R-Type series. It's a pretty good game. It controls really well, so it's fun to play, I guess. The problem is the presentation kind of sucks. It seems like they use the same 5 or 6 colors all the way through the game for everything. So all the levels and all the enemy ships and your own ship all just kind of blend together in this kind of red, white, and blue mess. Also, the music is absolute garbage. Up until the final stage, when all of a sudden a really good music track just comes out of nowhere. This is the second Irem game I beat this year. The first obviously was Metal Storm. And just like Metal Storm, Image Fight has a second loop that you need to play through to get the true ending, I guess. I declined to do that in Metal Storm. I did try to do it in Image Fight though. The problem is that the last stage and the last boss are just ridiculous. If you're fully powered up, it's easy enough to get through even on the second loop. But if you die on that boss, you're basically just stuck on this infinite continue loop where you're starting halfway through the stage without any of your power-ups. I made more than enough attempts at that second loop to decide that beating the game with one loop is good enough. And then after that, I played Legendary Wings, and this was a much better game than Image Fight. And it's also not really that difficult. Once you get fully powered up, you basically become invincible and you can kind of just sail through the rest of the game. Honestly, just surviving the first stage long enough to get fully powered up is the hardest part of the game. Now this is kind of a weird one where the game is actually really good, possibly even better than you expect it to be, and yet at the same time it's not quite good enough to be on anyone's top 10 or top 25 NES games. It seems like this is a game that ends up in everyone's game collection though, so it's worth playing at least once. And then I played Gradius 2. This is a fantastic game. This was one of the first Famicom games I purchased, so I think I've had it for maybe 12 or 13 years. I love this game. I played it many times. I love watching people play the game, but I always just get my ass kicked on the first stage, so I've always thought it was just too difficult for me to actually make any serious attempts at. But again, I revisited this game with renewed determination, and I was able to beat this game. I enjoyed it enough that after I beat it, I continued to practice at it until I got a no-death run. It's honestly kind of shocking that this is the immediate sequel to Gradius 1, which by comparison seems almost laughably primitive. In terms of graphics and music and stage design, there's a much bigger gulf of quality between Gradius 1 and Gradius 2 than there is between Gradius 2 and Gradius 3. This might be an overstatement, but this game honestly looks good enough that it could easily pass for an early Genesis game, possibly even a really early, somewhat ugly Super Nintendo game.
No, that's going too far.
As far as shooters go, Life Force is still my official favorite, but Gradius 2 is honestly a solid number 2. Hot on the heels of Gradius 2, I also played through Proteus. Now I'm going to give myself a half point on this one because I assumed that I had not beaten this game because I don't remember doing it. But as I was getting into those final stages, it all kind of started looking really familiar. Not like I've seen it on YouTube or something, but like I've actually played it. It's entirely possible that I might have actually beaten this game a number of years ago and then just forgot about it completely. Now maybe I beat it in the past, maybe I beat it in 2022, because I don't really know for sure, I'm just giving myself a half point on this one. But I'm supplementing that half point with this one, Silver Surfer. Now I did beat this game many times about 2 years ago. But as it happens, I needed to play the game again so I can recapture some game footage for it for another project that I've been working on. So I took that opportunity, because I love it so much, to try to beat my personal record at the game. My previous personal best 2 years ago was completing a one death run of the game. So this time I continued practicing it until I got the full no death run. So that's why Silver Surfer gets half a point. Proteus also gets half a point, but together they form a single game that I beat in 2022.
You seem like a calm and reasonable person. Are you? A calm and reasonable person.
If the moment calls for calm.
I'd say the moment calls for calm. Yeah.
Now before we go any further, I do have a confession to make, and it's probably not going to be easy for some of you to hear, so you might want to sit down. I'm one of the few people who did not really like God of War 2018. I love the original God of War series. I love all those games. I love that visceral hack and slash gameplay. I love the fixed camera angles. I love the violence. I love the blood. I love the music. I love everything about them. And I know that God of War is not the originator of that style of gameplay, but in my opinion, it is the series that perfected it. Anytime there's been another game that has played like that, I've always looked at it as a God of War game, that is a God of War clone. But flash forward to 2018. The video game industry has changed a little bit. Gamers have matured, a little bit. We now expect more from our AAA titles other than just mindless hack and slash action. And a new style of adventure game is now popular, with more of an open world scope, with a much stronger focus on story and much more believable characters. And it seems like the series was kind of twisted and shaped to fit the mold of this new style of game. So from my perspective, God of War went from being a genre-defining series to more or less following the lead of a number of games that were already popular in 2018. I'm not saying that God of War wasn't a great game, but I didn't like it nearly as much as the old style of God of War games. And in fact, I didn't really like it at all. However, I did really like the new characters in the game. I liked the new version of Kratos. I loved his relationship to Atreus. I loved Kratos' relationship to all the other characters in the game. And it's on the strength of those characters that I actually bought into the game. And that's why I knew that the second I had a chance, I was going to be buying the sequel, because that's how much I cared about the characters and the story. So on that note, I'm pleased to report that everything I did like about God of War 2016 was more or less repeated in this game.
Hello.
Hi.
So, what part of the enormous wall made you think, oh, visitors must be welcome?
And in fact, even the things that I didn't like were somehow a bit more tolerable. I'm not really going to say anything else about the game because I want to avoid spoilers, but I will say that I loved the new characters in the game, especially Thor and Odin. I love how they were handled.
This young man, who is my guest, is covered in mud. Care to explain?
He means to betray you.
Is that true, Loki? You a little trickster? I'm just messing around. Of course he means to betray me, huh? Heimdall, why else would he come?
I love that Kratos and Atreus actually had some agency within the story because they really had none in the previous game. So it was nice to actually see them, driving the plot and having actual influence over the events happening around them. All in all, I really liked this game, although I was not compelled at all to continue playing after I saw the end credit crawl. I didn't really care about getting all the achievements or maxing out the whatever. Honestly, I just kind of beat it and shelved it. I'm glad that I played it, glad that I saw the story through. I probably won't play it again.
No more fucking games! This time, I'm allowed to kill you.
And for my birthday, I got Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I'm not exactly a huge Kirby fan, but something about this game just appealed to me immediately, so I knew I wanted to play it. I think that Kirby made the transition into the 3D style of gameplay very well. I feel like this is actually Kirby's version of Super Mario Galaxy. I think it actually might be that good. I love all the new abilities. I love the big mouth abilities that Kirby has in this game. And I completed this game 100%. I hunted down all the secrets, I got all the items, I got all the endings. It took me about maybe 20-25 hours. I will definitely play this game again. In this last game, I literally beat on the evening of New Year's Eve, and that was Cuphead. Yeah, I know, I'm extremely late to the party on this one, but in my defense, when this game originally came out, it only came out on the Xbox, remember that? I had to wait like 1 or 2 years before it became available, I think as a downloadable title on, I think first the Switch, then the PlayStation 4. So as soon as I had the opportunity, I did download it, I think it was like 2 years ago on the Switch when it was available digitally. I put many hours into it at that point, but for whatever reason, I just kind of stopped playing it. And it's not that I didn't like it, I just found other things to do. So when I received this game as a Christmas gift last year, I knew it was my time to finally pop the game in, a physical cartridge this time, and beat the game. And so that's what I did. I think it was like 9 or 10 p.m. on New Year's Eve when I landed that final shot on the devil's face. And of course, I liked this game. It's exactly the kind of game that appeals to me. I think I'm probably the last person in the world to have beaten this game, so it's pointless for me to say anything else about it other than I really liked it. Now let's look at some analytics. Now I blatantly stole this idea from Jenn from Retro Rivals, but I'm not the only one. What can I say? It's a good idea. Now in total, I beat 43 games in 2022. I think that's actually above average for me. I think that thing might have been happening where the scientist was actually affecting the outcome of the experiment just because he was observing it. I don't know for sure if I would have beaten as many games if I wasn't keeping count throughout the year. But breaking it down by console, that was 1 game each for the PS3, the Wii U, and the Game Boy Color, 2 games each for the Genesis, Game Boy Advance, Wii, and the Switch, 3 PS4 games, 4 Game Boy games, 5 Super Nintendo/Super Famicom games, and finally 20 NES/Famicom games. Damn, that's a lot. Now, tracking my progress throughout the year, you can see that I was most active in March and September, although I think that's a little bit misleading because that's probably when I was just beating NES games. A little bit of a dip there in February, in July, and November, but I think during those time periods I was either working on a really long video or I was playing one of the longer games. So here is a quick question for you at home. Where do you draw the line between retro and modern? For me, anything current gen or last gen is still considered modern, so I still consider the PS4 and the Wii U to be modern systems. The generation before that, the PS3 and the Wii, I don't consider those modern anymore, but I'm not quite ready to call them retro yet, so I just kind of put them in a gray area where they're kind of neither. But as you can see from this pie chart, I play an awful lot of retro games. Interesting. And here's the part where I talk about the best and the worst games that I played in 2022. I'm gonna start with the worst. There are 2 games. The first is Joe and Mac on the NES, and the other is Bugs Bunny Birthday Blowout. This was an ugly, sloppy, janky, barely playable mess of a game, made all the worse by the fact that the Game Boy version of the game, which was a game on inferior hardware, was easily 2 or 3 times better than the NES game. Bugs Bunny Birthday Blowout was just a tedious, unfun chore. It was also an insultingly easy game. I wish it had actually given me a bit more challenge to the point where I might actually have been tempted to rage quit. As it was, I beat this game out of pure boredom and stubbornness. But the best game I played last year, and this is probably gonna surprise some people, Days Gone. This is another game that I really did not think a whole lot of as I was playing it. And in fact, after I beat it, I assumed that I would just want to shelve it and forget about it indefinitely. But it's also a game that I've continued to think about long after I beat it. It's not a perfect game, by any means, but as it happens, I happen to like imperfect games. I did not like the main character, Deacon St. John, but I thought of him as an actual live human that I did not like. I didn't think of him as a video game character. That's how well and how convincingly he was brought to life. In my last video, I said that I would likely never play Days Gone again, but I was wrong. I certainly will. So I know that I'm getting this out a little late. It's still January as I record this, but I'm pretty sure this is not going to come out until sometime in February. But those were all the games that I beat in 2022. So let me know in the comments what games you beat last year. What are some of your favorites? What are some of your least favorites? Those are always more fun to talk about. And I'm Mr. Matthews. Goodbye.